Hi, 6th grade. Happy Monday and welcome to Chumash class. Today you only had 2 psukim to translate. Wasn't that difficult. Before we start with the lesson, however, I want to remind you that you have a new set of shorashim on page 24. So please make sure that when you were working on these translations, if you weren't using the shorashim on page 24, pause the video right now, go back and do them, looking at those shorashim on page 24. You will need to know those shorashim for the open notes assessment on Friday. There will be 2 separate assessments. One will be the traditional shorashim quiz, which I'm expecting you to take closed notes, and it will be just on the 10 shorashim that are on page 24. And the other part of the quiz will be the open notes version of the assessment, kind of like what we did for Yud Aleph and Yud Bet. It'll be open notes, multiple choice generally, and you guys are going to do great. All right, so let's jump right in. Just to remind you of what we had learned in the last class, Paro and his army are basically like a few hundred yards away from Bnei Yisrael, right? They're facing each other. They can see each other. And Bnei Yisrael are freaking out, right? They're screaming out to Hashem and davening. They're yelling at Moshe, how could you do this to us? Why did you take us out? We should have died in Egypt, right? At least there we had some kind of stability in our lives. Ramban said that they doubted Moshe. Some people, right, the Rishaim, the wicked ones amongst them thought that like maybe Moshe had bad intentions, that Moshe had taken them out of Egypt, not because Hashem said so, but because he wanted to rule over them. Like they were really doubting Moshe, right? They were getting very suspicious of him. So Moshe turns to them and responds to them in the 2 psukim that we looked at today. And you'll see that this concept of Ramban, that like, oh, they were suspicious of Moshe, Moshe really, really brings home in the words that he says today. He really brings the idea home to them. No, this isn't me. I am merely a servant of Hashem. I am merely here as Hashem's messenger on earth. This is all God. Don't even think that this has anything to do with me. You need to trust that I am just Hashem's messenger. So let's look at it together. Open your packets, please, to page 25. On page 25, we basically have the entire text of the 2 psukim, Gimel and Yud Daled. So I am just going to read it from here, and we're going to translate it together. So you'll actually have a direct translation of these 2 psukim. So, Vayomer Moshe el ha'am, you don't need me to translate that for you. Moshe said to the people, Al tira'u. Remember, al, this is al with an aleph, not with an ayin. So with an aleph, you just flip the letters and it becomes lo, do not. The shorosh of tira'u is fear. Moshe says to them, do not be afraid. Hityatzavu u'ra'u et yeshuat Hashem asher ya'aseh lachem hayom. So hityatzavu was in your milon on page 25, and it means imdu, stand. Stand here, and you will see Yeshuat Hashem. Yeshua, we know, means salvation, or Hashem is going to the rescue, the saving. Asher ya'aseh lachem hayom, that he will do today. Stand firm, and you will see the salvation Hashem will do for you today. Right? All you got to do is just stand. Stand and watch. Why? Ki asher re'item et Mitzrayim hayom, because that which you re'item see, Egypt today, the Egypt that you see today, Lo tosifu lirotam od ad olam. Lo tosifu, you will, like lahosif, more add on, you will no more will you see them forever. Never see them again. So just hityatzvu uru'u, just stand and watch, because this is the end of the Egypt that you see today, the powerful, mighty Egypt. And again, Moshe is here focusing on Yeshuat Hashem. Again, this is all about Hashem is doing it. Hashem yilachem lachem. God will fight for you. Va'atem tacharishun. And you will be silent. You will not have to do anything. So this actually could mean 2 things. It could either mean like you won't have to do anything, or it could mean and you will have to be quiet. Like all of your complaints against me and against Hashem and all of that, you're going to have to be quiet, because you're going to realize, oh, we were wrong. We should be quiet. Okay? So that's what these 2 psukim are saying. Now, if you were a discerning Parshan, you would look at this concept of hityatzvu u'ru'u, just stand and watch. And you would know, like, something strange is going on here, right? We said that Bnei Yisrael were a lot of people, 600,000 people. And that's just the men, okay? Like the fighting age men. They were chamushim, according to Pshat and Rashi, means they were armed. They had weapons. And they were facing their enemy. They were not, like, this wasn't a surprise. They had, it's not like they were sitting unprepared. Like, yeah, they were camped, but they were right there. Like, they saw their enemy coming. It's not like it was a surprise attack. So what does this mean? We just sit and watch. That doesn't seem normal. That doesn't seem like a typical reaction to seeing your enemies starting to charge at you, right? It seems a little strange. The Ibn Ezra, who we said was Avraham ben Ezra, a Spanish Parshan, he has the same thought. Like, what's going on? Normally, when you're about to fight in a battle, you get ready, right? You let's say the women and the children, and you get the men standing in front defending them, and you get organized and you get into your lines and you get your swords out, and like, I'm just imagining like every battle scene that you can think of in, I don't know, Lord of the Rings or any of these like epic movies, right? So the Ibn Ezra says, when Moshe tells them just stand and watch Hashem's salvation, Hashem's rescue, this is what he means. Ki atem lo ta'asu milchama. Sorry, we're on page 26. Ki atem ta'asu milchama. You won't even have to fight. You will not have to wage war. Rak tir'u et yeshuat Hashem. Just watch, like a movie. Asher ya'aseh lachem hayom. Just watch the salvation Hashem is going to do for you today. You don't need to fight. Sit back, relax, just witness it. Won't even have to pull out those swords that you have. And by broadening out what Moshe is saying, like, yeah, this isn't like such a huge chiddush. This isn't a huge deal what Ibn Ezra is saying. It seems like we almost got that from the Pshat. But really what Ibn Ezra is bringing home here is that even though they were prepared for war, even though they had their weapons and stuff, they weren't even going to need to use them, he's saying, because Hashem's Yeshua, Hashem's salvation was so great and so powerful that they wouldn't even have to do their part. They were able to just sit back and let Hashem take care of everything, which is incredible. Like, we normally don't behave like that. Normally we say, Ein somchin al hanes, don't rely on a miracle. Normally we say, yes, you daven, you have faith, you have emunah, but you should also do your hishtadlut or hishtadlos. You have to do your part. You can't just sit back, watch the world happen and say, oh, Hashem is going to make a miracle for me. Normally we don't believe that. Like, we as Jews don't just sit around and say, oh, Hashem is going to make a miracle for me. I can go into battle unprepared. I can walk on a highway, across a 4-lane highway, and Hashem is going to make a miracle for me. Like, no. You have to do your part also. Like, Hashem wants us to do that. We're not supposed to sit around and wait for a miracle. And yet here, Moshe is telling them, no, here, sit back, relax, just watch. You're not going to do anything. This is 100% going to be Hashem. You're not going to lift a finger to protect yourselves against the Egyptians. Now, Ibn Ezra continues and says, Yesh litmoha. Yesh litmoha means one can wonder. There's something curious going on here. And I wonder if any of you had this question as well. Eich yira machane gadol shel 600,000 ish. How is it possible that a large camp, machane gadol, of 600,000 men would fear meharodfim acharehem, from those who pursued them? 600,000 is a very large number. What Ibn Ezra is implying in this question is that there were more Jews than there were Egyptians. The number of fighting age men in Bnei Yisrael was larger than the number of men in Paro's army. That's the implication here. Because to Ibn Ezra, it seems strange. Well, they had more numbers. It's not like they were unarmed, yeah, okay, fine. They didn't have chariots and maybe bows and arrows like Paro did, but like they had some weapons, They weren't like going to be fighting karate style just with their hands. So to the Ibn Ezra, it seems strange. If they had much larger numbers of people, why are they afraid? Like they could just overpower the Egyptians with sheer force of their numbers. And there's a second question Ibn Ezra says. V'lama lo yilachamu al nafsham v'al b'neihem. Why wouldn't they fight for their lives? I mean, they just got freedom. You'd think that the second anything seems to threaten their freedom, they wouldn't give up. They'd want to hold on to that freedom and fight to the death, right? So for the Ibn Ezra, the fact that Bnei Israel are freaking out when they see Paro's army doesn't make sense. Like, number one, you have a lot more people than Paro. Why are you scared to fight? And number two, why wouldn't they fight for their lives or even for the lives of their children? If not for themselves, at least fight to protect your kids who now have a shot at freedom, right? Like, you just got a taste of freedom for a couple days and now it's going to be taken away? No. Don't give up that easily. So to the Ibn Ezra, Bnei Israel's reaction seems very strange. Really? They're just gonna think that all is lost. They've seen all the miracles and they're finally free, and now they think that, like, okay, fine. So Paro's chasing after them, but they think it's all gone. They think it's all just going to be taken away from them. No, do your part. Stand up and fight. So Ibn Ezra responds, and this is actually a very fascinating idea, which I'm going to explore in more detail, hopefully with a video after this lesson. So Hatshuva. And he sort of gives two answers, which it's not like answer one answers the first question, answer two answers the second. It really just sort of, it all ties together. It all answers all of it. Ki ha-Mitzrim hayu adonim li Yisrael. The Mitzrim the Egyptians were the masters of Bnei Israel. Right? For 210 years, they had been Bnei Israel's masters. V'zeh hador hayotze mi Mitzrayim, and this generation, which was currently leaving Egypt, lamad mine'urav, they learned from there. What's the shorish here? Na'ar, which means youth, a young man. They learned from their youth lisbol ol Mitzrayim, suffer the yoke, the weight, the oppression of Egypt. They learned to suffer. They learned to deal with it. They weren't happy with it, but they learned that, okay, this is life, right? It was their new normal. They actually didn't even know a normal beyond that, right? They had been born into this life, and to them, suffering under the Egyptians was just life. That's how it was. There was no way to change it. So with that perspective, with that so deeply ingrained in their minds, how could they now make war against their masters? Something they had never even dreamt of, thought possible in their entire lives. Now you expect them all of a sudden to change their entire perspective in a moment? No, this is a panicked moment, and to them, they just jump right back into their old ways of thinking. They had enough time being free people to feel that they had self-sufficiency, to feel that they were able to fight back. So what Ibn Ezra is telling us is that it's actually quite understandable and normal for Bnei Israel to not fight back at this moment, because there's no way that they would ever consider fighting back against their masters. It was inconceivable. It was not a thought that even entered their head. It was not even a possibility, right? To us, yeah, fight back. But to them, it never even crossed their minds. And secondly, this is a more pshat answer, right? Less of the emotional, psychological. V'hayu Yisrael nirpim. Furthermore, Bnei Israel were weak. Like, they were slaves their entire lives. These were not, like, well-fed people. They were weak. Ve'inam melumadim lemilchama. They were not well-educated in the ways of war. These were slaves. They were not an army who knew how to fight drills and knew how to work with other soldiers and knew how to follow commands and knew like the art of war. They didn't know any of this. How can you expect them to fight? They have no idea what they're doing. And they're not in the greatest health. So Ramban, Ibn Ezra's two answers are very good, right? Like, even if they wanted to fight, maybe they couldn't, right? Number one, they were psychologically trained to be slaves, and they wouldn't even think of fighting against their masters. And even if the thought did cross their mind, they weren't well trained. So even if they wanted to fight for their lives and for the lives of their children, even if they did have larger numbers, either the thought didn't cross their mind to fight back against their masters, or they were just too weak and they thought we couldn't, or scared, and like we can't even consider the thought of fighting back. We're not well trained. They're a fully trained army. They're the best army in the world. So Ibn Ezra explains this in a way that's very, very nice and really, really well understood, I think. And it actually fits beautifully with a psychological idea, which I'll show you at the end of the video. Because first, I would like to answer the questions on page 26. So look at page 26. Please answer the following questions. Number one, b'derech klal, generally, ma osim ka'asher oyev mitkarev. What do you do when an enemy is coming close? Number two, ein somchin al hanes. Hasber. What does that mean? Ein somchin al hanes. Bet, ma amar Moshe livnei Yisrael la'asot bezman hazeh. By the way, ein somchin al hanes, I mentioned before. I didn't have it written out, but I mentioned it earlier. So if you were watching the video, you'd catch it. Bet, ma amar Moshe livnei Yisrael la'asot bezman hazeh. But what does Moshe tell Bnei Yisrael to do at this time? Related back to this idea. And Gimel hasber madua. Explain why. Pause the video, answer these questions, and come back and check in. Question one. When an enemy is coming, you prepare for battle. You get ready. You do your hishtadlut. You do your part. You don't just sit back on your tuchas and doing nothing and say Hashem's going to save you. Ein somchin al hanes means do not rely on a miracle. Okay, it's nice when miracles happen and we attribute them to Hashem, but you don't sit back and rely on for one. So what does Moshe tell Bnei Yisrael to do now? You can't rely on a miracle this time. Hashem's going to take care of everything. This is all Hashem, 100%. You're not going to have to do anything. This is Hashem, and you need to understand this, Bnei Yisrael. It's not me, Moshe, and it's not you. It's all God. And according to Ibn Ezra, why is Hashem going to be the one to take care of everything? Why are Bnei Yisrael not expected to do any hishtadlut? Or why is it impossible to ask Bnei Yisrael to fight against the Egyptians? Because Bnei Yisrael were unable to do their part in this scenario. They were still psychologically trained to be slaves. They couldn't imagine fighting back against their masters, even if they had the tools, the weapons. And besides, they were weak, and they were not trained soldiers. And also shows that Hashem is fully in control. So there's a few different ways you could look at this. All right. Please complete the check for understanding on Google Classroom. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you have an open notes assessment on Friday, as well as a traditional Shorashim quiz on Friday, but those Shorashim are just the ones on page 24. And now I'm going to show you a video. What the Ibn Ezra describes is something that psychologists figured out about 60 years ago also. But the Ibn Ezra lived like 500 years before these psychologists. And the Ibn Ezra describes something that in psychology is called learned helplessness. To be helpless means to think that you can't do anything. And I found a really nice video that describes learned helplessness, has a great example of it that's very similar to what we learned in the Ibn Ezra about Bnei Israel. And there's a really nice point at the end about how to notice learned helplessness in your own life and fight against it. So it's kind of related to Chumash, but I'm also taking it in a different direction, which is like, okay, now how can you apply this to your own life and not let it stop you? So I hope you enjoy it. This time I learned how to fix the audio so that it'll come through in the recording, but if it turns out it didn't work, I will also post the link on Google Classroom. So curious to hear your thoughts on this when it's over. If you have any ideas you want to share, please put them in the classroom chat. All right, what is learned helplessness? I can get my video. Sorry for the delay. We're going to get this to work, I promise.
What is learned helplessness? Well, in India, when elephant trainers catch a baby elephant, they tie its legs with a rope to a post. And this baby elephant will struggle for days trying to break free, and it eventually gives up when it learns that it's useless. When it grows up, these trainers keep it tied using the same rope. And even though it's now strong enough to break free and escape, the elephant stands around waiting for the trainers because it's learned that it's meaningless. This elephant has developed what's known as learned helplessness. And this is the fact that despite having the power to change its situation, it's learned to feel helpless instead because of the past. It was identified by a scientist in the 1960s who do the same thing by shocking dogs. Highly unethical, of course. But what does this have to do with us? Well, in your life, you may have experienced a crushing defeat and learned that there's just no way to overcome it. Maybe it's not the case. Maybe that's just a story you told yourself. Just think about it. If the average person does poorly on a test, they'll say the professor was too hard a marker. Whereas a clinically depressed person will blame themselves for not being smart enough. In both cases, the moment you give up, you've learned to be helpless of the situation. So in what ways has learned helplessness affected you?
Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that video. Definitely the elephant scenario is so similar to Bnei Israel growing up as slaves, right? Elephants from their youth, and Bnei Israel, Ibn Ezra says, Mina Urav. And I guess I want to take this as a way to challenge you, that if you can think of an example of learned helplessness in your own life, how can you snap out of that and realize, actually, you know what? I can be in control of this. I'm the one who can change the situation, change my destiny. All right. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a lovely, lovely day.